Welcome back to Summerween. The high today is 98 degrees, and that is cold. It has been much warmer lately. Today is actually like it's a cool front, if you will. So because summer is terrible, we're talking about horror movies. This is episode 2. Today, what are we talking about, Cam?
Well, today we are talking about a movie that scarred and shaped both of us in the world of horror, and I'd like to start by saying I would rather be stuck in an elevator with Art the Clown, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, the Cloverfield Monster, Jack Torrance, anyone you could name than the mom in this movie. Barbara Hershey scares the shit out of me.
You are terrified of that mom.
Yes.
It is so funny to watch.
Yes, she's horrifying.
She scares me too.
It's an incredible performance.
You are way more afraid of her than I ever was.
Yes.
I love it.
Of course, this is Black Swan, the Darren Aronofsky film from 2010.
So this was baby's first horror movie. This is the first horror movie I ever saw. I'm pretty sure. Like, when you too?
No, I'm just saying you saw it with me. I was there for that.
No, you weren't. I saw it in high school, Cameron.
No, I'm afraid not. We watched it together really early on. We
watched it together, but it wasn't... I had already seen it. You
fibbing.
Absolute moron. We didn't know each other in 2010. Anyway, I had seen like the like a random like, I don't know, like B-movie horror film before, but like this was like my first true horror film that I saw. And I saw it in the theater. And I remember because it came out when I was 17. So it was like the first R-rated movie I saw in the theater.
Did you have a chaperone or guardian?
No, because I was 17.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I was too much of a chicken to like sneak into R-rated movies beforehand. But I remember I had friends with me at this movie who were not 17 yet, and they snuck in, and I was like terrified. But this was like back in the day when there were no reserved seats, so they would just like buy another ticket to another movie and then just come into the theater. Like nobody was checking. It was.
I've never snuck into a movie either.
We're
not big rule breakers.
No. I follow the rules religiously. But so, and I didn't want to see this movie because I knew I was like, I'm scared of things. I don't want to see this movie. But my friends like just kind of forced me into seeing it. So I was like, okay. And it troubled me. This movie was scary, right? You said it scarred you too.
Sure. I'm just curious from your angle.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I'd never seen a horror movie, right? But it's because it was so psychological. Like, I think that's why it frightened me the most. Because it wasn't just a monster movie. Because a monster movie, I could be scared in the moment and then like get over it because monsters aren't real. But because this was so psychological and it's playing with like what's real, what's not real, can you trust yourself? Is it all in her head? That's what truly troubled me. And I remember like, this is so embarrassing, but I remember, so I'm like 17 years old, right? And I was so freaked out, like trying to sleep at night. I literally slept in my younger sister's room. Like she used to do that with me all the time when she was afraid of stuff because she was always afraid of everything. Love you, Emma. But like I was like, Emma, can I sleep in your room tonight? She was like, yeah, okay. She's like 15.
Was it that you thought the evil Black Swan ballet lady was going to come after you?
It wasn't even that. It was just I couldn't get the troubling images out of my head. And for a long time after that, every time I rewatched this movie, there were scenes that I couldn't watch again. This time we rewatched it for this series, and I watched everything now. And like it did not scare me now the way it scared me then. I mean, I can recognize that it's a well done movie and it's freaky in its own way, but like
you've seen some stuff.
The scenes that I was like afraid to watch when I was younger, I was like, Maggie, like literally, what was the problem? Like I remember specifically the bathtub scene when she's in the bath and then her own face like appears above her. It terrified me when I first saw it, and then the like. I don't know. I've rewatched this movie a lot. The many times after that I rewatched it, I had to close my eyes. Same with Beth and the
the nail file.
I mean, that's pretty rough, but I watched it this time and it was pretty cool. But it was so troubling. And again, it was like, and there's so much with mirrors in this movie. There's so many reflective surfaces and like things she sees in mirrors. Like I like didn't want to look in the mirror for like a long time after seeing this movie.
We should do the movie Mirrors starring Kiefer Sutherland.
I think that would
because that one messed me up when I was young.
I bet we would really like it now. I would not have liked it as a 17-year-old.
The scary part isn't just that stuff comes through the mirrors. It's that like towards the climax of the movie, the whatever the bad entity is, like floods the house.
Yes, so it's just mirrors everywhere.
So then the water is like a mirror. It's really smart. It's a smart movie.
That's very clever.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do that one day. But no, back to this. I mean, sorry, spoilers for Black Swan, but it's literally been 13 years. Like, figure it out.
Run packing your formative traumas.
I think the other reason I like this movie scared me, but I also really liked it. Like that was like the thing. It was I was terrified of this movie, but I couldn't look away. Not only because it was just like beautifully shot and well done and all that, but also because it was all about I mean, it was about ballet and like orchestral music. And I played the cello all through middle and high school. And I had my like best friend growing up was a dancer. And so I was like, I knew a lot about the dance world, even though I wasn't a dancer. And I've always been fascinated by ballet and like not only the artistry that ballet dancers, create, but also like the pressures of that industry and what that's like. And that's also kind of what this movie is about. And so I was like, I love this music. I love this world that we're in. And I love this, like, for me, it hit me as this movie that's about, like self-discovery and, coming of age and looking for love and that kind of thing, which really hits you when you're 17. You're literally coming of age. And so it was like the perfect movie for me, even though it ruined me. Right. And now watching it again this time, like I saw all those things and I was still like, yes, the orchestra music, yes, the Swan, like the ballet, the Tchaikovsky, the whatever, like that's all great. But to me, I extended it this time beyond the world of ballet and like classical music and artistry. And it just really struck me as a movie that's about ambition and self-actualization and self-transformation and how far will you go to achieve certain things. So the scope broadened for me on this, I don't know, fourth or fifth viewing, however many times I've seen this.
Because you've aged with the art?
Right, yeah. And also, like, I wasn't so distracted by how scary it was this time. Like, it didn't scare me this time. I mean, I felt, like, nervous at things and I jumped at a lot of the jumpy bits, but, like, it didn't, like, I had no trouble sleeping after we watched this. You know
the
what I
way
mean?
you've always talked about this movie is, like, you identified with it at first almost in a literal sense, because so much of the movie is behind the scenes of a big theatrical production.
Right.
So you had the tech theater angle.
Yeah, that's right. I also did that.
You had the orchestra angle. And all of those kind of knowing the ropes behind the scenes, the anxieties of that.
And knowing like how scary a dark theater is when no one's there.
Right. And the coming of age. And I think now you're seeing it from, you're zoomed back a little.
Yeah.
So you can see what the characters are doing, why whether or not their anxieties are proportional to what's going on, and then sort of the subconscious behind that, those heightened emotions.
Well, and you know what this is? This is Whiplash for girls.
Well, I was okay, so that's a good segue into my point.
Perfect.
The thing I was struck by, I mean, the first time I saw this, it was just surreal and powerful. I'd never really seen anything that went this hard. And I was trying to define that, like, what does that mean? That this movie goes so hard. It is so wrapped and focused and tense. And it's this incredible sense of hunger from everyone involved. It's all of the actors, the director, I think it was 3 writers, the editor, the costuming department. You can just feel this pressure that they've put on themselves. You can feel a passion, a focus. It was like every scene was could have been a music video for Lose Yourself or My Shot. There's just there's a pressure here.
Yes.
And that final shot of Natalie Portman, that like slow fall at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
That when I watched it this time, I don't even know if I felt it last time. It was just the film grain, the angle, the performance, the way everything was crescendoing at the right moment. It felt like an Oscar shot.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that it was a shot that panders for an Oscar that they play in the montage when the person walks up to give the speech. Because there are plenty of movies that do that are made to be awards contenders. You know, Oscar bait is the sort of insult for that.
Yes.
But this just felt paramount. It felt like the movie was peaking at the perfect curated moment. It was pretty astounding, that shot this time. And there are so many shots throughout the movie that have that sort of startling intensity. And it almost... There were either zooms or people looking at the camera. There were these moments that reminded me of Stanley Kubrick. And again, not in a way that was, copying someone's homework.
Right.
But it still felt wholly original, but it got to that point of intensity that not many people have. But when you watch something like The Shining, we watched this cool video essay a couple weeks ago about all the times Jack Nicholson looks at the camera.
Yes.
And they reminded me of the just striking kind of spare intensity of that film. And I think this had some of that.
Totally.
But maybe more than anything Kubrick did, this movie reminded me of Whiplash and Amadeus.
Yeah.
And it's not just because they're kind of about music. It's because they're about this obsessive plot that revolves around the creative process. And they are fairly unflinching looks at the creative process because it's not like Dead Poet Society.
Right. It's
which
not
is-
romantic at all.
It's not romantic. It's not inspirational. And there is a cruelty in Dead Poet Society.
of course, yeah.
But I would say overall, it's much more romantic than
Yes.
something like Whiplash is. The creative process, as it's seen in this little subgenre, is 99% striving and failing.
Yeah.
And it's that striving, which is a word that I always pull from Faustus. I think that's sort of why that story hits so hard for me. It's passionate people chasing that fleeting or impossible moment that Natalie Portman's character gives voice to here when she talks about the struggle towards perfection.
Yeah.
And the movie becomes so much about perfection and the creative process that for me, it was almost uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it became, in the same way I'm uncomfortable watching Whiplash or Amadeus because I identify with them so hard.
Yeah.
I'm getting some of that from The Idol right now on HBO. But this was a new addition to that canon.
Yeah.
It's not derivative. It just sits right alongside them on the shelf.
Totally, yeah. And it takes it in this like darker place. Not that Whiplash and Amadeus aren't dark, because
Sure.
they are. But this takes it like to the extreme level, and you get really, really inside an artist's head and like see how much they can unravel, you know?
Because Whiplash has the tension that this movie does, but it's much more grounded.
Yeah.
People bleed, but it's because they're playing the drums too hard. Amadeus has the tension because people die, but that one's a biopic.
Yeah.
This one, because it surpasses the natural world, because it jumps into that surreal place, I thought this one was much more bothersome than the other ones, because by exaggerating so much, it found this strange pocket of truth.
Yeah.
I thought it captured the emotional wildfire of the artist's life better than the more realistic films could, because it does feel so transcendent and powerful. There's something in that push, which I struggle with a lot, that feels beyond understanding.
Yes.
It's that sense of grasping, that total desperation, the addiction of it. I thought the surrealism in this movie captured that in such a primal, frenetic way.
Yes.
That I thought the mountaintop for that was something like Whiplash or Amadeus. But I think Black Swan might hit it more true.
Yeah.
Because it's from such an intense, elevated angle.
Right. Well, and I think what makes it even more, if you want to use the word realistic, is that, like, comparing it to Whiplash, at the end of Whiplash, I mean, you can argue back and forth forever about whether or not J.K. Simmons' character was good for Miles Teller's character. You can argue about, is he happy at the end? Is he successful at the end? But, I mean, overall, I think it's the one of the thesis statements of that movie is you need somebody to push you.
Yes.
Even if they're a terrible person, even if like you're like it ruins your sense of self, like J.K. Simmons pushes Miles, I'm sorry, I don't know their names. He pushes Miles Teller's character, and like he is a great drummer at the end. And you can argue about whether that's worth it or not, but like there's a much more definitive ending. Here it's much more complicated in Black Swan, because you have the character of Thomas who pushes Nina, but ultimately it's her pushing herself. Like you have the people around her, you have Thomas, her mother, Lily, the other dancers, like just Beth, like just pressures from exterior, but like it's all self-driven. Like that's what pushes her over the edge. And we can get into the ending of this movie a bit later, I think, but about like whether or not she is successful, whether or not that pressure has been beneficial for her. Like it's much more complicated than just, oh, I had this great mentor who pushed me and now I'm great, because that's not usually how these things go. So that I think it's more realistic in that sense, even though it is surreal and supernatural.
It takes such a different avenue than something like Whiplash or Amadeus does. I think these three are very much in conversation.
Yeah.
But they all arrive at the same point, I think, where the lead, who's pressuring themselves way too much, arrives at that point of perfection. They do the thing.
Yes.
Miles Teller's character does the solo, and he impresses J.K. Simmons, and he kind of leaves his body and does that amazing thing at the end that you get to see.
Yeah.
We know that Mozart was successful. We see his compositions. We see his legacy.
He completes his opera at the end. Right.
And here we see the successful first performance of Natalie Portman's character, as she opens the Black Swan show.
Right.
So we see them all be successful, but that's not the thing that makes us uncomfortable.
Right.
It's whether or not it was worth or what they
Right.
sacrificed to get there.
And what happens after.
Right, what's
Yeah.
left of them now. And I love that because that does fuel a conversation. It's not just us asking, like, did they die at the end? Was it all a dream? Because you could do that. You can't really do that for Amadeus because it's a real guy.
Because it's a real thing, yeah.
But you could do that for Whiplash.
And you can certainly do that for Black Swan. Yeah.
But I don't think that's the interesting or relevant conversation
I totally agree.
for any of these films.
Just like, yeah, I don't think it's like, oh, does she die at the end? I don't think that's the point at all. And that's not even what I'm going to debate here.
And even if other movies tee up those questions where you can then go away and talk about them, I'm struck by rewatching Black Swan because we rewatched the other two that we're talking about fairly recently. I was struck by how much Aronofsky seems to clearly not care about those questions.
Right.
Like
right.
I have a note on the surrealism.
Okay. Yeah, that works great. Let's do that now.
So the thing I loved here, the first time I saw it, it was just scary.
Yeah.
Because there's so much happening that is impossible, but you're seeing it. And the movie feels so grounded that when someone turns around and has Natalie Portman's face, you don't know what the hell's going on. And it's disconcerting.
You're so pulled into Nina's perspective that you are just as confused by and like simultaneously believing in and not believing in what's happening with her.
Right.
Like she, is looking in the mirror and sees herself do something that she herself was not doing. And of course that's impossible, but the way that we've been following her and like the way that it's shot and everything, you feel like you are seeing that truly with her. And like it feels incredibly grounded in that way because we're so tied to Nina's perspective.
And that's what I was struck by the first time I saw the movie, was the discomfort of the surrealism.
And that's why it was so scary to me.
Right.
And why I believed that that myself in the mirror was going to slice at my nails. I mean, I knew that wasn't going to happen, right? Like, but you still are very afraid to look in the mirror. Yeah.
The thing that struck me this time was how clear it is. The clarity of the surrealism I loved so much because you could spend hours debating the questions of what's real or not in the story, what actually happens, but you're not confused while you watch it. And I've seen plenty of movies that go for these moments of confusing surrealism.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of muddles what's going on.
Right, and you're not sure what's going on.
And you'll be chewing on the weird imagery and miss half of the next scene.
Yes, right.
And I think the achievement here is how clear everything is.
Yeah.
Because Aronofsky, he makes every contradiction explicit. There's not really a question. He shows you something impossible.
Yeah.
And then almost immediately just moves on.
Yeah.
Whether it's seeing another Natalie Portman, seeing someone who's supposed to be dead, who's now knocking on the door and alive, seeing the feathers or whatever grow out of Natalie Portman's body.
Yeah.
He shows you those things and then moves on.
Right.
But the plot is so spare and clear that you can chew on those things without missing anything else. Like he makes room for them. There's a sense of calibration that is so expert in the movie that I never felt lost, even though the plot, the journey that this character's on continues immediately.
Yeah.
You get the sense that Nina is confused and disoriented. She's expressing those feelings that we're feeling in the audience, but we're also locked in with her journey.
Right.
And eventually, as the movie goes on, I felt like I was much more clear on what's happening than she was.
Sure. Yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead.
Well, that gives you a sense of control.
Yeah.
Where something is confusing, but you also have a sense of control over the narrative. So you aren't disoriented.
I see, yeah.
She's in free fall, but at some point we aren't anymore.
Right. And I think what helps is that none of the other characters notice what's going on. Like nobody else seems to notice the feathers. Nobody else seems to notice the stuff she sees in the mirror, like the her own face that she sees everywhere. Nobody else sees that, right? But it's only at the end really when everyone else notices the blood that we realize, oh, that was not just in her head. And so like there's a clear understanding of what's in her head and what's not. It doesn't make it less scary. Like it's, in fact, that's actually even scarier because nobody else can see what's going on except her. So she feels like she's going crazy.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's where I was trying to build because that final shot is this moment of total interpretation as the finale of the movie. It's a striking, incredible image, her falling, seeing this wound, not knowing if that's real, but the fact that other people are reacting to it probably means that it is real.
Right, yeah.
And it doesn't really matter, but I think that's a stronger case.
Yeah.
Because everyone else is reacting to it.
Right.
But the striking part of that image is that it works regardless of your reading of it. because the script is as clear as it is pliable.
Sure.
You can buy into or not buy into basically all of the surrealist flourishes of the movie. You could believe that Mila Kunis was killed off.
Right.
And that she's just so far gone by the time she gets back to her little dressing room that she doesn't even see the body anymore.
Yeah, sure.
You could argue a bunch of that stuff.
Oh yeah, and that she like imagines her coming up to the door. And,
maybe they did hook up, and maybe she's pretending that they didn't to screw with Natalie Portman.
Right.
You could play it all of those ways.
Yes.
And that's what I meant when I said the script is pliable. And it reminded me a little bit of The Whale, which I think was sort of both of our favorite work of art of the last year.
Yeah, it was.
In 2022.
We didn't do an episode on it, but we mentioned it in our like end of the year wrap up. We loved that movie.
We did like a mini episode within the end of year wrap up.
Yeah, we did talk about it for a while.
Because we realized that it was both of our number one. So that's sort of a mini episode about that one if you haven't heard it. But The Whale gives you this similar sense of devastation that I got from Black Swan, but where The Whale has this established control and mastery, where it feels like a stage play from someone who understands every word of the script. And you've got this one big Titanic performance. You've got this swath of pathos and this emotional turmoil that's flowing through every scene. There's a sense of control there, where I almost don't think of the camera moving in that, because it feels like you're just locked in one location with a guy who can't move around that much.
Right.
So there's a total control and desperation in The Whale.
Yeah.
Black Swan is always swirling.
Yes.
There's this sense of seething hunger in Black Swan.
And frenetic energy and almost panic. Yeah.
It's a frenzied confidence and panic. It's this knife edge. It's this sense of menace. And I realized that in comparing these movies, Black Swan is less of a reflection of a subject, which I think is what The Whale is.
Yeah.
It's very much a retrospect at the end of someone's life.
Yes.
And even if you think Black Swan is the end of someone's life, Black Swan is an interrogation of a subject.
Yeah.
It's attacking the subject throughout the film.
Yeah.
And I really like that. I know it's not the beginning of Aronofsky's career at all, but I view this in the way I would a really striking debut. And I see The Whale like I see The Tempest, or something towards the end of a career where it is more reflective. So I think these pieces work as beautiful bookends of that ruthless, unblinking way of making art that I admire so much from Aronofsky. Even when a movie like Mother doesn't work for me, I love the way he makes movies.
Yeah, me too.
And I was struck this time by how similar it is to the things I've come to love in a film like The Whale that I don't think would have spoken to me in 2010 the way that this did.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what's so nice about this movie is that because like even though there is this clarity to the script, this realism, like you said, there are so many directions you can interpret this, right? And you know, when I saw this for the first time, and even the couple other times I watched it after when I was in college, like my interpretation of this movie was ultimately that it's a coming of age story, right? It's this woman who, even though she's clearly like a full grown adult, is like trapped in this like extended adolescence, living with her mother. She has no self-confidence. She's afraid of everything.
Stuffed animals everywhere.
I mean, her bedroom looks like an 8-year-old's bedroom, right? And and her name Nina, literally like Niña means girl in Spanish, like it means like young girl. And you know, she's wearing white and pink all the time, and it's like so clear, like the symbolism is so clear. She's the white swan, she's innocent, she's young, she has no sense of self. And then over the course of the movie, she becomes a black swan, and she, you know, starts to assert herself. She has a sexual awakening. No, I'm just saying, like it's a very like it's very much there. It's a pretty clear cut like interpretation, and I'm not saying I think that's bad. Okay. I'm just saying it's very obvious, right? Sorry. I'm being sarcastic.
She goes through the motions. No, who gives a shit?
I'm just being sarcastic at my own self, I think. But you know, she learns to assert herself. She starts wearing gray, and then she starts wearing black, and then she literally kills her innocent white swan self at the end, like, and she tries to leave her mother. You know, she has all of that, and I think that's a totally valid interpretation, and I think that that portion is totally meant to be there. And a lot of people, and myself included, interpret the end when she's bleeding as like sort of like she's like getting her period, right? Like there's that growing up, becoming a woman imagery there. We see that with her sexual awakening as well. But I think upon rewatching this now, I see it less as like coming of age, you know, learning who she is, abandoning her child self and becoming an adult. And now I think it's much messier than that, and it's about how do you change while maintaining your own sense of self.
Yeah.
And so this is where I have this like larger question, not about does she die at the end, what's happening at the end, was it all real?
Boo.
My question is more, does Nina succeed at the end? Does she achieve perfection? Does she get what she wants? Does she become who she wants to be, who others want her to be? I think that's really the question that this movie leaves you to ponder. I think I know what my answer is, but I'm curious what you think.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Tell me why.
Yes, because I think she has... you mentioned like that Arrested Development that she's sort of stuck in. Because she's technically an adult, but very much not living as one.
No, not at all.
The way she talks, I've seen Natalie Portman in 1,000 roles, and I love how much she uses the highest part of her register here. And it's not even that, it's like she doesn't let much air out.
No, she's talking very softly. She's not speaking through her diaphragm. She's like speaking through her throat.
It's an incredible amount of control in the way she's delivering these lines.
I read a portion of an interview when I was researching this movie that said that she, for a long time, had been criticized by how high her voice was in her career. So she like worked with vocal coaches to like bring her vocal register down and have more like assertion to her voice. And so then doing this movie, she felt like she was like undoing all those years of progress, which was very interesting.
And I've always thought she was a powerhouse performer.
She's incredible.
In movies like Annihilation, I think she's incredibly strong and watchable and magnetic in a totally different way than this. But I'll always kind of think this is her best performance.
Yeah.
But
well, she won the Oscar too.
Sure, but that doesn't always mean it's your best performance.
Oh, no, it doesn't. I'm just saying I'm glad that she was recognized for her great performance.
DiCaprio's best performance is always going to be Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, it's never going to be
The Revenant. And I mean, that was incredible too, but I've never seen someone sweat like I did in Wolf of Wall Street. But it's because Nina has that almost childish outlook and sense of the world, where she doesn't seem to see a world beyond the next season at the ballet company. So I think she achieves success or perfection in the way that her slightly immature mind can conceive of it.
Okay.
Where I don't think she sees the decades-long career like Beth has. I think she just sees getting that approval from the people at the company, from her mother, from the audience cheering her in the lead role. I think once she hits that for the first time on this opening night, even if she does die right afterwards, I think that is the mountaintop for her.
That's interesting. So I feel like you and I are thinking about what her goal is. I think our definitions of that are different.
Okay.
Like it seems like your interpretation is that her goal is to achieve perfection, and the Black Swan journey she goes on is just a means to an end. Like she's not trying to change. She's just trying to embody this half of this role so that she can be the perfect Swan Queen. Is that what you think?
Yeah, I mean, the takeaway that I got from the commentary on the artist's life and the difficulties of that, the commentary I took away when I watched this movie this time is that perfection is achievable, but it will ruin you and it's extremely fleeting. So I think the thing she's getting as she sees Beth retire, as she sees all of these things go sideways and wrong, she sees all these near misses. I think she gets, by the end of it, that perfection is something you achieve for like 3 seconds at a time. That it's not something you can sustain or that anyone could sustain for any longer than that. Yeah. So the fact that she does touch that ceiling at the end of the movie, I think that is her fulfilling that arc and succeeding.
That's totally fair, especially because I mean her last line is I was perfect. Like she seems happy with where she is.
And she knows that she's aging. Yes, she still is sort of trapped like a kid. But when she knocks her mother for being 28 when she left her dancing career to raise Nina, she knows in the back of her head that that's sort of the end of that career.
Yeah.
And Nina's character is closer to 28 than she is 13.
Yeah, no, she's definitely she's not 21.
So
like,
I think she knows that
there.
she's getting there. So if she achieves perfection here before she hits that like barrier in her mind, then yeah, that is success.
Sure. Okay. No, that's totally fair. Because I very much see it as her goal at the beginning is to be perfect. But then like throughout this journey, she realized like in learning that, oh, I have to like also embody the black swan in order to like be this perfect swan queen. That sort of alerts her to all the ways her life is not satisfactory to her. She realizes she doesn't want to live with her mother. She doesn't want to be trapped in this adolescence. She doesn't want to be so fragile and frigid and young, right? She wants to be like an adult with like her own sense of self. So I think it's like her goal at the beginning is to be perfect, but in the process of becoming perfect, she sort of develops new goals and is trying to figure out who she wants to be. I don't think she ever has a clear idea of what or who she wants to be, but I think like she's like on this journey of self-discovery and of trying to become her own person and not this like person that her mother is molding or that Thomas is molding. And I think she does not achieve that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that by that framing, she doesn't succeed. I think we're just framing it differently.
Yeah.
But both, I think they're both, I agree with both views here.
Yeah.
Because when that moment where she's fighting with her mother and she says, "I'm moving out."
Yeah.
What does that mean to her? Like, does she have any conception of what that would be like?
I don't think so.
When she goes to the bar with Mila Kunis, is that the first time she's ever been to a bar?
It kind of seems like it. Like it. I mean, the way that she rebels against her mother is the way that a teenager does.
Right.
When a teenager says, "I want to move out," or like they go out with their friends for the first time and they think, "Oh, being an adult is so easy. Like, what am I doing? I need to get out of here." And she has no conception of what that would actually be like in New York, trying to live alone as a ballet dancer. Like, she's not gonna be able to afford that.
She can't conceive of anything beyond this opening night, which makes sense why the movie culminates there, why it ends there.
Yeah,
because that part of her dying, like she's going to be if she does live, she's reborn into something else the rest of her life, figuring out what that is and what that looks like.
Well, okay, sorry,
but like I think that might be the scarier part for her, that this is the end of the story she's able to predict.
Well, right, and I think that she, like, what I want to get at is I think ultimately she cannot kill that old part of herself and like be reborn as this new person, because I think ultimately like this new, she's got this old white swan identity and she's sort of coming to embody this black swan identity, which is basically, child Nina and adult Nina. That's really what it is, right? I think child Nina, white swan Nina, is who she really is, and that part of herself cannot coexist with the new part, and so it's never going to work. And I think I want to unpack that a little bit more. So her real self, her white swan self, who she is, like, and who she has always been, is terrified of this black swan part of her. And I think you can really look at that through the lens of her sexual journey on this movie. So, I mean, every time she's confronted with Lily, who like is this person who Nina knows she has to try to be in order to be successful as this swan queen, her reaction to Lily is always like fear and embarrassment and disgust. So anytime she's seeing Lily be promiscuous or sexually independent or free, confident, she's just not. She reacts to that in such a negative way throughout the entirety of the movie, not just at the beginning. At the end of the movie, when she is on stage, like performing as the Black Swan, she looks off stage and she sees Lily flirting with the male dancer and like touching him, and you get this sense that Nina is repulsed by that. Like, even when she's like about to reach her peak as the Black Swan, she's like, ew, I would never do that. Like, she has this almost prudish reaction to it. Like, we're meant to look at it as like that's a bad thing. And throughout the movie she does soften to some of these things. Like, she becomes interested in sex. She engages with Lily and Thomas sexually. She, goes out with Lily. She sort of starts to learn how to embody the Black Swan in her performance. But in the end, she's still, again, she's uncomfortable with how Lily is being with the male dancer. In the peak of the story, when like things all go sideways and all the scary things happen, it's like set off by she sees Lily and Thomas hooking up, and it's terrifying to her. Like we see Thomas turn into Rothbard in this like really frightening moment. Like I think part of it is that she's just upset because she feels betrayed, but I think it's also that she would never hook up with somebody off stage. Like she would never do that. Like I think that's part of it too.
She's scandalized. Yeah,
exactly. She's scandalized, and like these two Ninas can't exist because they're counter to each other. In every single scene where Nina is experimenting sexually, it ends in Nina's own fear. So the first kiss, I'm going in order of the movie. The first kiss scene with Thomas in his office, she responds with fear and like goes into fight or flight and bites him. He likes that, and that sort of like cues him into, oh, here's like this, like she can be this really like interesting, scary person.
Sure.
But it's because she's afraid. It's like a survival instinct, right? And then when she's in the bedroom masturbation scene, her mother is in the room, and so it ends with her literally like stopping, panicking, and then literally hiding under the covers.
Right.
Like it ends in fear and shame and disgust. And then when Thomas is seducing Nina during the rehearsal, after he tells the dancer and the pianist to leave, and then they have that moment, Thomas is the one acting. He pulls away, and then she becomes upset, and then she's literally sitting in front of a mirror but won't look in the mirror. Like she can't confront her own self, and she's ashamed of herself. You could see that in the moment she was wanting to keep going with Thomas, but it ends with her own shame.
And he verbalizes those worst fears when he says, that was me seducing you.
Right.
It's supposed to be the other way around.
Exactly. Yeah. And then later when she's in the bathtub and she tries masturbating again, it literally ends with her seeing her own self, and she's terrified and she stops. So she's confronted with herself, and she is afraid and ashamed. When she has sex with Lily at the end becomes Nina. And so it ends with Nina being frightened and disgusted by her own self.
Right.
And then her very last like sexual act is after she does her Black Swan performance, she goes off stage and makes out with Thomas. And that is, I think, her most successful sexual encounter in the movie. Yeah. But so like that goes well. Like she stops and walks away, and he's like, oh, it was pretty great, because he's disgusting. But then she immediately goes into her dressing room and is confronted with the dead body in her closet, which we know is her.
Right.
And she panics and literally covers the blood that's leaking under the door with a pink towel. So she like takes this baby pink is like this symbolic representation of her youth and innocence, and so she literally is ashamed of her own self and hides it like less than 30 seconds after making out with Thomas. That one I think is a bit of a stretch. I will own that. But I mean,
I don't think so.
But those are all, like every single sexual encounter she has ends in her own fear and shame and disgust. And so she cannot accept this other part of herself. She's trying so hard to make it happen. She's trying to do what the people around her are telling her to do, telling her what she should be doing. She should be trying to abandon her mother. She should be trying to become this like sexually liberated woman, but she can't. And so I think ultimately these two parts of her cannot coexist. And so even though she does she kills her innocent white swan self in a sense, like she becomes the Black Swan at the end. Her killing Lily is really her killing her innocent self. It doesn't work. And I think that's ultimately why at the end one could easily interpret that she dies, because these two things can't exist at the same time, because even if she embodies this new part of herself, her old self can't live with it and hates it. And so it's never going to work.
I think this is completely tied up in her only understanding of the world. The only setting she's comfortable in is this studio. And she has barely any conception of the world beyond that. Even with her mother, who's basically the only other person she knows in a true sense, because she sees people at the studio, but she doesn't know them like she knows her mother.
Yeah.
Her mother did the exact same thing she did. And then when she aged out of that, she just became the stage mom. So she thinks you're either in the ballet or you're on the shelf watching the next person do the ballet.
Yeah.
So it's this idea, and I think this is sort of an artistic fear or worldview, that you get progressively better. That you learn, you train, you practice, you grow, and your career gets better, and every work you make is better than the last. And that's, of course, not how it works for any artist, but that's not how really anything works for any human.
Right.
So the fact that every time she advances in this discovering herself and exploring her sexuality, that there's some sort of failure or backsliding or second guessing at the end of that is her kind of grappling with or coming to terms with this idea that growth is nonlinear. That she can move forward and assert herself and be confident, and then she gets nervous and the pink towel comes out.
Right, yeah.
It's all of this kind of backsliding.
Yeah.
And uncertainty.
And even what Tama points out about her dancing is that she is technically perfect. Like, she's nailing the moves. She knows how to be this like technically perfect dancer. But even with all those years of practice and progress, that doesn't matter if she can't look relaxed and dangerous and sexual and, you know, appealing, right? Like, if she's just being technically perfect, that doesn't matter. So that's the only kind of progress she's been focused on, but that's not the only kind of progress that can make you successful.
Because the perfect technical skill is just the white swan part of it.
Right.
And I think if you do take the optimistic view of this movie, that she does achieve that maturation by the end of this opening performance, then the way she's congratulated, the way she's basking in having achieved something great, and I think this is where Toma connects with her at the end. It's that she achieves that moment of perfection, being the black swan, even though she stumbled and messed up earlier in the performance.
Yeah,
it's
true. Yeah.
It's that you can achieve greatness with the stumbling. It's that growth isn't completely linear. It's not as binary as that.
That's
and
nice.
I think so much of that worldview and thinking, the way she's viewing the world, is tied up in this really rigid artistic process.
Yeah.
That's the only thing she's really spent time with in her life.
Yeah.
And so much of that is tied up in the way color is used in the movie.
Totally.
I'm glad you talked about the color pink as this representation of youth or innocence, this feminine coming of age signifier. And I love that we get to watch that color, this like pastel talisman, move through the characters of the film as everyone's vulnerabilities arise. You see the pink sort of pop up in different character arcs. But even besides that, there are a few color flourishes. But the movie is almost completely black and white. Yeah. Besides that, whether it's the clothing, the set design, everything about that ballet studio is starkly black and white. Yeah. With this gorgeous, constantly shifting interplay between who's coming in the studio wearing all black and all white. Someone's wearing all white, but they have a black scarf on. Yeah. And you're parsing that like, I mean, it's simplified in a way that's good, in a way that's clear. The same way the imagery has clear contradiction. Yeah. So you can absorb it and move on. There's a lot of that here with the way color theory is used. And it foregrounds the white swan, black swan symbolism. It's simple enough that you can play with it every time it pops up and kind of file it away in your head. Yeah. As the movie progresses, you can build these theories. But the black and white is also, I think it represents this binary way of thinking. Yeah. This artistic, apocalyptic mindset that these characters have, where everything is a competition. You either win or you're a failure. Yeah. You win and destroy everyone, or you're a total failure and your life has amounted to nothing. Yes. It's this zero-sum game way of thinking. And over time, the more you watch the way these characters interact, the way they dress, the intensity of their relationships, their disdain, I think this builds into a sense of danger. Yeah. And it's not just that everything's monochromatic, it's that there's this sharpness and contrast to everything, where no one can sit still or relax for even a second, because there's always someone coming for them, and they're always thinking the worst things in their heads. So you have the movie balancing on this sharp edge, where it's not just black and white, it's this deathly abyss shadow or a blazing spotlight. It's the beginning of the world or the end of the world. It's life and death. It's success and failure. And those binaries overwhelm them. Yes. Because like we just talked about, art is not a clear road from failure to success. It's never clean and clear like that. Right. So they do have to learn to be comfortable in this world where both parts of the binary exist at all times. There is success and failure always on the table. Yeah. Sometimes within the same performance, and that doesn't mean it's good or bad. Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, and I think talking about Nina having experienced this growth, I think that makes sense, because the old Nina, the Nina we meet at the beginning of the film, would not consider her performance in that opening night
perfect because she failed in the first act,
Right.
because she stumbled. But then at the end, she does say, I was perfect. And so she has recognized, like, she's sort of moved past the binary and has grown in that way. So that's really interesting.
I think she's achieved, and that's what I'm calling the maturity at the end of the movie, that coexistence, that you do have to kind of be the black and the white swan, and that everyone has both of those parts in them. And I think the way I get there watching the movie is just... I realized this thing a couple years ago, that movies are mostly people walking 5 or 10 feet and the camera pointing at their faces.
Yeah.
Like, regardless of what's happening, regardless of how big the budget is. Yes, you'll cut away and see a car turning into a big robot or something, and that'll be $100 million. But most of movies, and I noticed this from making comics, because when you're making comics, you're drawing the same faces over and over. And then you watch a movie, you're like, this would be so much easier. I could just point a camera at this person. I don't have to draw them 8 times on the same page.
Amazing.
It's mostly just faces.
Yeah.
And when you have a performer this good, and so much of this movie is just staring at Nina.
Yeah.
It's staring at Natalie Portman's performance. I think that's why this has a similar kind of stage play quality to The Whale.
Yeah.
It helps that most of it takes place on a stage. But
Literally, yeah.
I was shocked by how much of the movie was handheld camera work.
Yeah.
And I think that elevates the intensity, the groundedness of this performance, because it makes the film feel confessional and intimate.
Yeah.
And as things get more and more surreal, as you see more and more explicit contradictions, the film feels hopelessly, dangerously subjective. Especially in those moments where the focus pulls or draws.
Yeah.
When you lose focus on the scene as she sort of spirals off into some overwhelming thought and the world almost blurs away.
Yeah.
The thing you come back to and the thing you're spiraling away from is Natalie Portman's performance.
Yeah.
She is the anchor for this movie as it shifts wildly between genres. I mean, you talked about this in the beginning as a horror movie, and I think it is.
Yeah.
But it's also a drama about the creative process, like we talked about before.
Of course.
It's a horror movie. It's this psychosexual thriller.
Yep.
But in every moment, first and foremost, this movie is a character study.
Yeah.
And Natalie Portman's performance is so strong, and Aronofsky is so tuned into it. He gives it such room and breadth and focus that she guides us and anchors us through all of these shifts and pushes and pulls and maturations and regressions.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful pairing. And I felt this way about how he worked with Brendan Fraser in The Whale. I feel like he forms these unbelievable connections with his lead actors.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really, that was one of the things I noticed more this time, was how the handheld camera work complemented the intensity of the performance, how everything felt so tailored to what Natalie Portman was doing.
Yes, right. And like every interaction we have with another character, Nina's in every scene, and every character we see is through Nina's perspective. It's how she sees them. So like it's likely that maybe the mother is not that overbearing and terrifying. It might just be that Natalie Portman, or Nina, is terrified of her mother. It might be that Lily's not nearly that much of a free spirit, like promiscuous, but like that's how Nina sees her. Thomas may not be this like terribly like sexually exploitative, like abusive, terrible director, but she's seeing him that way. I mean, I think those parts of those characters are all there, but it's to the extreme because that's how she's seeing the world. Just like in the same way that like whoever, like the person who is the lead dancer in a ballet, it so doesn't matter. Like the people are just there to enjoy the ballet and have a good time. But like it feels apocalyptic for these people, for Nina and everybody else in the company, right? Because that's just the nature of that industry. So it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, we're so anchored to her perspective.
If there's a sliding scale of believability or surrealism in the impossible things that you see through the movie, the things that seem untrue and exaggerated, I noticed this time that the things that were pure imagery, feathers growing out, someone's legs buckling and them growing like a bird, you get that. You get what that's doing.
Yeah.
But the rest of them are kind of dicey. And I think there is a scale there of what feels true or what feels like something that is Nina imagining the worst case scenario. And I think the less believable, the more impossible ones are everything involving Lily just like openly seducing someone in front of everyone,
Yeah.
whether it's with Thomas or whether it's with that male dancer.
Mm-hmm.
When I
Or the
viewed,
waiter.
yeah, when I
Yeah.
saw the movie this time, those struck me as the least true of those runaway surreal moments, because they are so much what Nina is afraid of.
Yes,
They're
right.
so perfectly tailored to her worst fear and imagination of what everyone is like.
Yeah.
Because she knows that she's in this kind of arrested development and that everyone else has been maturing and growing.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought those moments really felt like projections in a way that the other things didn't.
Interesting. Yeah.
Where I don't think Lily was that conniving.
I don't either. I think she was just like a different personality than Nina and just like wants to do well in the company like all the dancers do. Like there's no way she cares that much about trying to take Nina down. Like I think Nina says like she's trying to replace me. I'm like, I think she's just a competitive dancer.
Right.
Like it's okay, Nina. It's going to be fine.
And that made me appreciate that character more. Because Mila Kunis plays both sides so strongly.
Yes.
Where you have that, I mean, the fun part when she's kind of making fun of Nina for having this like sex dream about her.
Yes.
And she's like, was I good?
Yeah. Like that was her being genuine.
Yes. And that was kind of the like fun, easygoing, like White Swan version of Mila Kunis there.
Yes, right.
And then you have this like powerful, kind of seductive Black Swan version. And she plays that really well too.
Oh yeah.
But she doesn't wink at the camera.
Right.
And tell you which one is more real or which one you should trust.
Right.
In the same way Natalie Portman doesn't. So even if she has a much smaller role, I would say it's as strong and committed. And I got that sense with pretty much everyone here. I mean, I talked about Barbara Hershey playing the mom, how terrifying and good she is.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you have Vincent Castle, who's Thomas. Like, those four leads are all incredible.
Yeah.
And they could all anchor a movie alone.
Uh-huh.
The fact that they're all working together so well and on this same page, it really pushes the movie to another realm.
Yeah.
Because you get to watch Whiplash and you have Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons playing off each other. I mean, it's this like titanic rivalry
Yes.
and relationship
Yes.
that they're building. You have Salieri and Mozart in Amadeus. And my favorites, I mean, I'm horribly biased here. My favorite stories are always two leads. The interplay, the evolution in a relationship between just two leads. That goes back to Faustus for me.
Sure.
And this one has four, but they're so good.
Yeah.
And there's such complexity. They're so developing and nuancing these themes that, I mean, the movie's like, what, 90 minutes?
Yeah.
Something like that?
It's like maybe closer to 2 hours, but it's not that long. Yeah.
But I've been chewing on it since we stopped watching.
Yeah. I've been chewing on it since I saw it 13 years ago.
That too.
I think about it all the time.
It's just incredible.
Yeah. It's a good movie. And there's so many little like details throughout. Like, I mean, there are mirrors and reflective surfaces everywhere in this movie, which is just like freaky, but also like it's about Nina's perspective. It's like what she's seeing. It's her trying to confront herself all the time. And these reflective surfaces also distort reality. In one of the earlier scenes when we first see the scary mom's studio, the most terrifying thing you've ever seen, one of the painting's eyes move.
Yeah.
Even though it's not like necessarily a scary scene, like they all move later on, but like it's just right at the beginning. In Nina's bedroom during the masturbation scene, there's like a single black stuffed swan in there, and like there's a swan mosaic in the bathtub, like just little things like that throughout the movie. Just these little like visual symbolic cues that are really fun. The club scene is really great. I spent like half an hour looking up like slowed down clips of that club scene because there are so many like flashing images in there.
Everything's kind of drowned out in this red light, and you see these different shots of them dancing.
It's like strobe
transforming,
lights. And I certainly didn't catch everything, but there are a couple shots of Rothbar, the evil wizard owl thing, who's like very freaky in this.
It's like
movie.
a big crow.
Yeah, but he's really freaky. But you see Rothbar, you see Nina wearing the Black Swan makeup just for a second. You see White Swan Nina in the background. You see some of the other dancers in the ballet. You see Nina's bedroom and the butterflies, which is part of her innocence, but also then that later on happens when she's in the bedroom with Lily. At one point you can see Beth watching Nina, which is really fun and freaky. And then there are other just like truly terrifying faces throughout. Some other people have said they saw Thomas in there. I never saw Thomas, but that doesn't mean he's not there. But just all these fun little flashes that you're not going to catch. But the point is that they're so fast that you you catch some of them, and the rest you just imagine and are afraid you will see. And that's the whole point of Nina, is that or what's happening with Nina is that she does not quite know what she's seeing. All these things are happening, these flashes, these little fleeting moments, and it's all about what she's afraid, and that's what she's afraid of, and that's what she sees. So
you and I have, I think, one of the most important things we share is this fondness, this soft spot for perfectionist artists, whether it's Kubrick or Fincher, these control freaks. Yeah. And I think there are plenty others that I could name, but those are probably the two best touchstones for a conversation like this, where both of those guys, they have such a focus and an intensity for all of the little details that when you watch something like The Shining, like Seven, I treat it like this feast, this buffet, where everything has been perfectly made for me to pick apart and dive into. And it makes it, like, you can't argue that everything in every movie is completely intentional, like you could in a book, maybe. Because some things just happen, and it is so collaborative that maybe you can't give all the credit to any one person.
That's true. That's true, yeah.
But in a movie like The Shining, where people have spent 40 years parsing every tiny moment and getting such rich meaning out of it,
yeah,
I think that's the reward of the perfectionist.
Oh, sure, yeah.
When you see Fincher talking about wanting everything in the cupboards of the Underwood's apartment in House of Cards, like controlling all of that, then I can do a close reading and be pretty confident that most of the things I'm paying attention to were a creative decision.
Yes,
and not incidental. A movie like this has such a death grip on its imagery and its themes that whether it's the color theory, and you can credit anyone for this. I mean, my compliment is not just to Darren Aronofsky here. It's to the costuming department. It's to everyone else involved. But there's such a control of the imagery, of the swans, of the birds, of the black and white, of the sexual imagery throughout, whether it's the color pink or all of these other evolutions. It's so well done that I feel like you can stare at this thing and really write 1,000 pages about any one scene of this movie.
Yeah.
It has that total control of its imagery and meaning. It's incredibly rewarding to rewatch.
It is, yeah. If you have, seen this movie, but you haven't rewatched it in a while, I highly recommend a rewatch. If you haven't seen it and you somehow listen to this, still go watch it because it's great, and we didn't reveal all the freaky bits.
But it's one of those special works of art that you will get something new out of every time you watch.
Totally. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I like that this episode's almost a retrospective because you think of this movie as so formative to you, and you've had this decade-plus relationship with it.
Yeah, yeah.
I like checking in with these sort of eternal works of art.
Me too.
That just hit us at the right time and that we can grow with.
Yeah. Oh, also, a bunch of the score is the Swan Lake music played backwards, which I think is so fun. Like, it's a lot of the music itself, but then there's like a lot of distortion and the music being played backwards, and that's really fun too. So just like, the attention to detail of this movie is incredible. So
this is one of those all-time episodes, like when we did Pride and Prejudice or Goodfellas or any of those like works that are incredibly important to us. This feels like one of those. I'm glad we covered it.
I've been excited to talk about this movie since we started this podcast, so I'm glad we finally got to do it. Well, happy Summerween. We'll be back next Friday with another Witcher episode, but the week after that we will do episode 3 of Summerween. So we do episodes every Friday. Every other Friday is The Witcher, and the off Fridays are Summerween, with the occasional Tuesday episode.
And the last, those are the kind of bonus episodes. We also have bonus episodes over on Substack.
We do,
where you can support the show and get a bunch of bonus content over there. There's a little vault of premium episodes building up in there. And if you missed the first Summerween episode, we talked about Cloverfield.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. That was 2 weeks ago.
And
that movie,
totally different movie than this one.
That one scared the shit out of us for different reasons.
For very different reasons. Yeah.
No nail file.
And that one we hadn't seen until like last month.
Right.
So that was pretty exciting.
And thank you for everyone emailing us in with recommendations for us to look into for Summerween. We've got like kind of a soft list going.
We do.
But we're trying to be flexible.
We're flexible. Yeah. If you like really want us to watch a certain movie and talk about it, send it our way.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. Well,
we'll see you soon.
Stay cool.
Have a good weekend, and don't do ballet.
Don't do ballet. That's the lesson. Don't do ballet.
All right, bye.
Bye.